AV dudes and dudettes, are we ready? Whoop. Checking one thing for... No, I heard the no. Okay. Well, a couple of things. Tonight is the party. Okay, I'll give you the cue. Tonight is the party. Again, please be sure you bring your ticket. You need your cocktail party ticket. We're going to have seating at 7:30. We're going to be closing maybe 10 minutes or so late, so they might need a few extra minutes, but, you know, we'll hope to be bringing you in about that time, okay? So be sure to bring your ticket. That is required. It's been an extraordinary day today. We've got so much stuff to talk about. We are floating. We are floating. And, wow. Well, this is going to be a capper tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm ready if the AV crew will tell me so. Okay. Here is the presentation that you have either been yearning for or dreading. Everybody has checked their gloves and their brass knuckles at the door. No, all kidding aside, guys, the case that we're about to consider again is indeed, in all fairness and honesty, probably the most controversial case that has been out there that I can remember. The two sides that are polarized on the issue about this case, it's funny. I myself try to talk to people that are on the naysay side of it, and it's like a steel curtain is drawn. And it's almost impenetrable. But I, for one, hope we can penetrate it a little bit, because the Congress just simply wants to bring the testimony, the evidence, and the facts as we can have them disseminated to everybody so that you all can make up your own minds. Okay? This is what we're all about. Not to prejudge, not to condemn, not to censor. So, again, I only urge everyone, as I have from the very beginning on this case, to just keep an open mind. When we welcomed the group back 5.5 months ago, and they did a 3-hour update addressing most of the serious questions that had been asked about the case, many of them, it was rather astounding. It actually penetrated some of that steel shield for those that would at least listen and open their minds. And tonight, we're going to get yet more evidence and verification. So, Dan Irea is going to begin, and I'm not sure about the order from there, but then we have Dan McAvoy, we have Robert Wraith, and last we will hear from Dr. Jonathan Reed. And guys, even that, many people will say, shh, oh, doctor, no. Well, you've got to listen to the 3 hours of evidence that was presented 5.5 months ago, because, guys, this is Dr. Jonathan Reed. I'm sure of that now. But from this point forward, this is the Jonathan Reed, the Dr. Jonathan Reed Update 2.
Thanks, Bob. I think what I want to say first is I want to really thank Bob Brown and Terry Brown, because without this forum, I don't think there are some organizations that purport to be truth seekers. Well, the only ones I've seen so far that really come through on that has been the UFO Congress for me. Now, I'm not involved with MUFON. I really don't know or understand the organization that well, but I have been here, and I'm impressed with what Bob's done. He's allowed us to come and talk, and the most amazing thing is he's really doing this for you people, not for us. He's trying to give you an opportunity to judge for yourselves, and that's all we really want, is to have people like you come and listen and judge for yourselves without having to listen to all the hoopla that's going on around it. Just see it firsthand for yourselves. It's very simple. And it's the right thing to do for anyone who really wants the truth. Second thing is I want to find out how many people haven't seen or heard this case. Quite a few people. How many people came today just to see this, or came to the Congress just to see this case? Quite a few hands. Sort of. We got a lot of hands I see there. That's good. I'm glad to see that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first, really quickly, and then we'll get on to the more interesting stuff, not my background. My background is actually mechanical engineering and systems. If we could switch over to the PC projector. Thank you. Here are some of my credentials, because that's what people are all about, it seems. I don't know why, but I'm going to show you anyway, just so people know. I have a Purdue degree, Bachelor of Science. There that is. I worked for many different companies throughout my career. Microsoft was the one I was working at actually when I heard about this case from Robert Wraith on the Art Bell program. I worked at Compaq Computer, Apple Computer, Lucent Technologies, AT&T, doing mechanical design for consumer electronics products. Okay, that's enough about me. Okay. Now, one of the things that most people will want to see who've never seen this case before is the video evidence. And I want to go ahead, for posterity's sake, I think we've got to show it. And so cue up the first video, and we'll let that play so that everyone can get a feel for where this case came from. The first video, yes. Do we have audio? It's not really critical.
Focus.
Can we get the lights down there up front? This is an electromagnetic disturbance. We believe it was caused by the obelisk, which is the black thing you'll see here shortly.
Oh, come on. Come on, work. Fuck. Come.
Some people said the audio didn't distort. You could hear there the audio doesn't distort. Unless Dr. Reed just turned into a devil cloud or This is the black object we call the obelisk. Dr. Reed called the obelisk.
Come on, work. Come on. I can't believe it.
He's saying that because we can actually see in the viewfinder that this distortion is occurring. He's concerned that nothing is being recorded.
Come on. Come
Just go to the Bob was in.
Where are you?
This is from about 100 feet away from me right now. He's standing on top of some trees that have fallen. The branches and the plants actually getting away right here. I mean, this is a physical object. It's obviously there. Some people tried to say that it was cut and pasted in some kind of Photoshop application or something. I mean, I don't know how you can look at this video and say that that object is not there.
You see it?
Okay, continue that on. We're going to go ahead and show the house footage too. Might as well get that out of the way so that some of the people who haven't seen this footage can get a feel for how compelling and powerful this evidence really is. Turn the lights back down. You can turn the volume down a little bit there. Okay, was there a question? It is in color. It's supposed to be. Wait, there you go. Yeah, that's in color. I mean, I don't. Does that not look in color to you? Yes. Yes, I'm going to talk about that. And this is after he's brought this thing home. He was, as you can see in the forest video footage, he was extremely distraught. He was you know, having a reality check because he didn't understand what was going on. He was extraordinarily sick. He'd been vomiting for over an hour. He was dehydrated, and that's why he was wheezing and panting. Plus, he was in a higher altitude, so the oxygen was thinner up where he was at. So he's running around the forest. He's dehydrated. He's sick. Well, he wrapped this thing up and decided he was going to try to hide it. Before he knew it, he was back to his car, and he ended up bringing it home with him. And this is a short time later, he decided that he was going to document it. Because he made some phone calls with some friends, and nobody had called him back. Curiosity got the best of him. He came home, got cleaned up, and then went and got this back out of the freezer that he had put it in his garage because he was afraid it would decompose. And now he's going to do a little physical examination on his own. He's either extremely brave or extremely stupid, I don't know which. At this point, he actually thought it was dead. So we'll learn later that it wasn't dead. This is the thermal blanket he wrapped it up in, and he had some straps he had wrapped around that he'd taken off his backpack. Yes, see, he is blinking. Now, he didn't actually see it blinking when he was recording this. He was looking through his viewfinder in his camcorder, which was a black and white viewfinder. It was about an inch square, And that eyeball probably represented about 2 or 3 pixels in that display. So it would have been very difficult to see. Pardon? I can't. The creature was approximately 4 to 4.5 feet tall. He measured it. I don't know the exact number. I think he said 4 feet tall, 4.5. It weighed about 40 to 50 pounds. Extremely light. It was wearing a black one-piece suit that covered its hands and feet seamlessly. There appeared to be no seams or buttons or zippers or anything. It just appeared to be totally around it. You can see it's kind of a turtleneck, so to speak. It's kind of a long neck. Well, we didn't have him medically examined, but I would say he had to. He had quite a headache, and you'll see that later on. He actually, you know, well, some people don't know the story, so let me quickly recap after this video segment plays. How the creature actually got in this state is an interesting story all by itself. You watch the eye there as it kind of opens as he turns its head. He was a little out of it at that point, I would say. Now the noises that you're hearing here, those are coming from the creature. Now he thought that as he was moving its neck that air was just escaping from the lungs, and he just wrote it off as, you know, just this creature was still dead. Now he's kind of opening the eye there just to examine it. He's filming with one hand and moving it around with his other, so it's kind of hard. You can see him kind of feeling out there because his distance perspective is a little off looking through the camcorder. His what? Yeah, there is some blood up by the head. Oh, it was red. And I assumed that it was probably red because it breathes air. It's oxygen-based, and therefore it probably used hemoglobin the same way that we do, and so its blood is going to be red also. Can somebody repeat that question for me up front? No, this is the same footage that we showed. I'm just showing this so that other people who haven't seen it can see it. Some people may not have a good recollection of all the footage. Now, this is the same footage. Okay, you win. I can argue. This was filmed in October of 1996. Now, he actually had the encounter on October 15th. This is sometime that evening, late that night. Yes. This is not the original. This is a copy of the original. The actual original, I believe, was stolen. This copy happened to have been sent off to a relative or a friend, I'm not sure which, and that's how he ended up still having it, because everything was taken out of his house. That noise came from the creature again. Yes, he actually has this camcorder. At some points he has it duct taped to a ladder. At other points he has it sitting on top of a box. Of course, you can't see that because it's sitting on top of it or duct taped to it. That's the one. Of course, you can't see that because it's sitting on top of it or duct taped to it. That's the wound, and you can see that's a pretty severe wound. It actually breached the skull when he hit this creature with a tree branch. It was attacking his dog. It killed his dog. He reacted instinctively by, he had a tree branch already in his hand, and he swung it and hit the creature, knocking it down. The remains of his dog was white powder, and I'm going to show you that later on. There were no remains that you could just pick up. I mean, it was powder. And I'm not sure he had any interest in really in getting that. That came from the creature too. Okay, I think you can stop the video at that point. You can see the whole body is there and everything. So, you know, some people say it was just a head at one point. Okay, now, real briefly, I want to summarize what happened to get to that point, because I didn't realize there are some people that don't know that story. He was on a hike with his dog on October 15th in the Cascades east of Seattle. They were on a trail. The dog took off running ahead of him. He had a 7-year-old golden retriever. She smelled something or sensed something. She took off ahead of him, ran to the brush, disappeared, and seconds later he heard the dog in a struggle with, it seemed to be a struggle for its life. And he picked up a branch thinking he needed to defend it from a bear or a wildcat, and when he broke through the brush, he came upon this creature. His dog had it apparently by the left arm. It was vibrating, apparently trying to get away from the dog, and when it saw him, it stopped and looked at him briefly, and then it proceeded to kill his dog. When he saw that his dog was in the throes of death, he became extremely mad, and he took a couple steps forward because he wasn't that far away. Plus, he had a long branch at that point, and he swung it. The creature, I wouldn't say, he said he didn't hit it full, but it was a glancing blow, but hard enough that it knocked the creature down, and it basically looked dead. For all practical purposes, he thought it was dead. I mean, he really felt that it was dead. So he wrapped it up, took it home, and then you see what he examined it. He called his girlfriend, his best friend Gary. Nobody was home, so he ended up doing this examination by himself. It's pretty compelling evidence all by itself, but we've assembled a team of researchers, myself and Dan McAvoy, and we want to share our research findings to help justify. There are some points of contention, I guess, in the research community, and we want to help clarify those things. One of the things that I want to point out, I guess initially, is, and this is just from logic, okay? And I want you people to reflect on this in your own lives. If you didn't have a degree, and you weren't a doctor, and you didn't work at a university, do you think it would be possible for you, and I assume most of you have friends and family in your lives who know you quite well, do you think it would be possible for you to lie about all that stuff, that you're a doctor, that you went to UCLA, that you went to San Diego State, that you worked for 13 years at the University of Washington, that you made all these claims, and then you went publicly with this information, and somehow we're supposed to believe that people in his past have not come forward to refute that? If it wasn't the case, then why has no one come forward to refute it? I know I couldn't do that. If I claimed I was a doctor at the University of Washington, my friends would be laughing about it, and my enemies would certainly come forward and say something about it. But nobody has, and that's suspicious all by itself. And that's just common sense, folks. I mean, apply it to your own life. Do you think you can get away with a monumental lie like that? There's no way. It's not possible. And in fact, the only people who have come forward to testify about anything have corroborated what he said. And we're going to be showing some of that. So think about that in your own lives, and I think you'll come to some good conclusions there. Now, we've also been the brunt of many attacks. As Bob has said, there is a dividing wall between the two factions, either the believers or non-believers. It appears that there's not too many people that can be in the middle. You are allowed to say there's not enough information. You are allowed to say that. It's not a black or white world. We don't always have enough information. But what we do have is we have a right to discover information and have it not be suppressed. Well, I'm going to show you some information that we did an article recently. How many people subscribe to UFO Mag or see that, the U.S. version, not the U.K. version? Not that many, but recently in one of the U.S. magazine, or the U.S. version of UFO Magazine, they did an article where they supposedly did some research, and the article was, in my opinion, poorly written, poorly researched, and I want to tell you what I did. If you could switch back to the PC projector for a moment. What's that? Okay. I wrote an article for them, and this is back in August of 2001. I wrote the article for them and said, take a look at this and see what you think. I put a lot of research effort into this. I showed a lot of pictures. I summarized it. I answered common questions. I said what was unique about the case. And I was, giving them this. These are actual photographs of Dr. Reed's that he was going to allow them to print. No charge, no big deal. I went through a long, probably about 3,000 to 5,000 words of explaining the points of the case, why they are important, showing various aspects of the case, and they totally ignored this research, including the bullet wound. And they made a big deal about the bullet wound, and that it's not like any bullet wound they've ever seen. Well, if they had read this article that I wrote for them, they would have had answers to all these questions. Or watch the video that Ron Garner gave them, which also had the video footage of the bullet wound that you see here. And we're going to show that bullet wound video later on here. But this is the kind of stuff that we have had to come up against. And what it amounts to is that it doesn't seem that some people have a willingness to try to educate themselves adequately about a case. And you would think someone in UFO Mag's capacity and responsibility would find it incumbent upon themselves to educate themselves extensively about a case. And yet they came up with this article that was founded on I'm not sure what, because they didn't use my research and they didn't use any of the video evidence that we sent them. In fact, we have a copy of that magazine floating around here. I think Dan McAvoy has a copy. If anybody cares to see it, come and talk to him. I even went through the witnesses, Betty the nurse, Valerie, which we're going to talk about all this stuff here shortly. I laid it all out for them. Harold Chacon's credentials, Dan McAvoy's investigation. The whole magazine could have been devoted to this one thing here if they really had taken the time to do it. And I did it for them, so I was a little perplexed by that whole situation. That was one of the things. We've also been attacked by the Pacific Northwest, and I'm covering these things because people have emailed me in frustration saying, Dan, why don't you defend yourselves with this stuff? Well, because we'd spend all day trying to defend ourselves against these people. They don't have common sense. They don't really want the truth. But, I'm going to say something because I think there are some points that need to be addressed. A group called the Seattle Chat Club up in the Pacific Northwest, I'm not going to name names because that's really immaterial, but they took a witness up in the Pacific Northwest that claimed to know Jonathan and Robert, and they called this witness Skip. And they claimed that they had interviewed this person, and here they wrote an article in the Seattle Weekly and said, these are the results of that. And they said, we found out that Robert's not using his real last name, he's using the pen name. Oh, that's fabulous. What great research there, detective. Then they said, well, Robert worked at this gas station, therefore he couldn't be an author. And I'm like, he can't be an author. Did you look at the book? I don't know. You guys use your own brains on this, but I'm just telling you what was happening. Now, during this interview, they took a couple pieces of that type of information, and they fed that to the Seattle Weekly, and the Seattle Weekly ran with it. They called me and asked me if I would be willing to talk about it. And I said, sure. So I sent the woman who wrote the article a long email explaining to her all the points of the case, and she pulled the UFO mag and ignored it all. So I'm going to read to you, okay? And there's a lady who helped me with this. Lexi, are you out there? Where are you at? Are you hiding from me? Come on up here for a second. Just for a second. Don't be shy. Lexi, actually, I just want her to verify that, and she's already looked at this, but I want you to hear from her that she provided me this interview. She took the meeting minutes during this Skip interview, and she provided me the actual meeting minutes so that I could see what was said and what the Seattle Chat Club neglected to mention. Okay?
Okay, it's true. I was at the meeting and I took notes of the meeting.
There you go.
I was at the Seattle Chat Club meeting and I'm the one that took the notes while Skip gave the interview. I was at the meeting and I took notes of the meeting.
There you go.
I was at the Seattle Tech Club meeting, and I'm the one that took the notes while Skip gave the interview.
Okay. Is any now? This is just somebody who happened to know us and said, you know, I think these guys ought to be given a chance. And she got really fed up with the way the Seattle Chat Club was running things, and so she said, you know what, I'm going to help these guys out. So she sent me this list. And go back to the PC projector for me real quick. Okay. Appears that we're probably at the wrong resolution here. Let me fix that. They're nobody. Well, they used to be, they were formerly called the Seattle Art Bell Chat Club. And they were dismantled by Art Bell because Art didn't like the fact that they were not representing him very in the best light. So, I mean, I'm trying to be kind about this. Let me get this over here. Can you go back to the PC projector for me? There we go. Okay, now, what Lexi recorded was, there were approximately 10 to 15 people at the meeting. Now, I'm going to read this to you because I'm not sure everybody can even see that. Seattle resident Skip, not real name. Skip's about 6 feet tall. I mean, she just recorded the minutes as things happen. His real name was withheld for whatever reason. He was a room. Pardon me? Pardon? Oh, yeah. Well, I'm just going to read this because I don't. Even the people in the back, even if I made it larger, still wouldn't be able to see it. But this stuff is going to be up on my website, so you guys can take a look at it. And my website's aliendestiny.com. Aliendestiny.com. So anybody who wants to see this research can go up there and look. Robert lives in West Seattle, blah, 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 blah. This is just general information. Now, down to some of the more important information. This is things he recorded, that she recorded along the way. Pardon? I'm going to read it, okay? Okay, so there's a lot of personalization to this. You know, says Skip felt uncomfortable with Jonathan's expensive clothes. There were a lot of personalizations, and I'm not going to read any of that stuff. But it does say here, Jonathan did not have a PhD according to him, but he did have a BS and a master's. This is according to him. He's wrong, but that's beside the point. When asked how he knew that he had a master's and a BS but not a PhD, Skip stated that he figured that out because he would need at least a master's to work where he did. And that he didn't think he had and here's his reason, okay? He didn't think he had a PhD because the story was so incredible, okay? Now, he did say that Jonathan worked at the university hospital full-time with autistic kids, which is not entirely true. He did not work with autistic kids per se. They were actually psychologically troubled kids, which, you know, he could have been confused by that. But he did corroborate that he worked at the university. Now, the Seattle Chat Club totally neglected to mention this. They just said, oh, well, that kind of corroborates the story, so we better not mention that. It says Jonathan's mom lives in West Seattle, and that, again, these are half-truths because I don't think this guy knew Jonathan very well. He probably hung around and heard some things and didn't understand what he was hearing and tried to just extrapolate information. And these guys were really badgering him to give them information. It says Jonathan went to UCLA and UW, was part of it. Again, these are kind of important things that the Seattle Chat Club should have mentioned in this article, but they didn't. Jonathan had mentioned knowing the colleague that was shot at the UW, and we'll talk about that. That was a gentleman who had been helping us. And then interesting here says, Skip says that Jonathan is not a psychiatrist, but possibly a psychologist. Well, he's always said he was a psychologist, so this just goes to show you this guy doesn't know him that well. But he did corroborate that he felt he was a psychologist. Down lower it says that Harold Chacon, who was one of the people who helped us with the specimen analysis, has more than one degree from Puerto Rico, that he thinks it was something like health sciences, but he didn't know. Harold speaks fluent English and is bilingual, which was consistent with the fact that Harold Chacon had attended the Pontifical Catholic University of Puerto Rico, because, I mean, he would have to speak Spanish, so that added up also. That was consistent. Says someone brought Harold Chacon a tissue sample, but Harold didn't have a lab in his house or a computer. I'm not sure what exactly that meant. You know, I'm not sure how many people have a lab in their house, but you know, they apparently thought that was important. Harold's degree comes from a Catholic school in Puerto Rico. And then Charlotte introduces Skip as a credible witness. So she goes through this whole thing, and she says, this guy's a credible witness, and we should believe everything that he says, but yet the only thing that they did was they found a few facts that really didn't mean anything to the case at all, and they used those in the Seattle Weekly article and forgot about everything else. This is the kind of stuff that we have to deal with every day. And people wonder why there's so much confusion about this case. It's because there's so much bad information going around there. And there are people with agendas and counter agendas, and all these things add up to confusion for everybody involved. And it wastes my time, because then I have to go through and counter all this bad information, which is, you know, a waste of my time and a waste of your time to have to sit through bad information. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions with that? Okay, now I'm going to show you some other things here that I think really need to get out, that are really important. This is an internet. We went through this last time, but I'm going to go through it again because I'm not sure I made it really, really important. There's a third-party website called IAF.net. You can go to it yourself. It's on the web. It's almost like a phone directory, only it's email addresses. It's a third-party collection source for email addresses. And it just so happened that Lexi, again, found this. She was doing some digging, trying to find some verification of Jonathan's background, and just so happened that if you see here on the screen here, and I'm not sure if this is big enough for people in the back to see, but this says Jonathan Reed, jonathan@homer.u.washington.edu, 8/21/96. Now this came off of a third-party website. It has nothing to do with us. It's just it's a separate entity. It's just a business that collects email addresses. Now, what's important about this is 8/21/96 is a system-generated date. You can't change that. When you enter this data the first time, that date is created for you by the program that manages this database. It's not something that you can change. It's not something you can add in. It's not something you can go back and later modify. It's simply generated by the system. So at least in 8/21/96, there was a Jonathan@homer.u.washington.edu. I mean, that's clear. Now, somebody will ask me, well, how do you know that that was an employee and not just a student or whatever? Well, if you go down here a little bit further, I explain that. What you find out is that Homer is actually a faculty and staff server for the University of Washington. So whoever this was, whoever this Jonathan Reed is, was a faculty member or a staff member of the University of Washington in August of 1996. Now, I used that piece of information, and I said, okay, you know, let's just check this out one step further. I went to the campus, to the UW campus. I went to the payroll department for the psychology department for the University of Washington, and I met with the payroll director, and I showed him a picture of Jonathan. I showed him Jonathan's name, and I said, this person worked here, and I'm doing a background check. He worked here from 1983 to 1996. I just wondered if you can give me any information about him. Well, he did several searches, and he came back and said, we don't have a Jonathan Reed, a John Reed, a Jonathan Reed under any spelling in our database as having worked here. So, well, that's interesting because this email existed in 1996. There's no doubt about that, and it was a Jonathan Reed, regardless of some people have noted the spelling was different, but that there are many spellings of Jonathan, or misspellings, I should say. Some people have spelled it with an O, some people with an A, and you know, I think even if you look in the brochures for the Congress, it's spelled with an O. It just gets confused on a regular basis. The important thing is that there was no Jonathan under any spelling, which can't be, because here it is on this third-party site that we have nothing to do with at all. Okay? Now, later on, I went back and we did an email update, and somebody had destroyed this information, but I just wanted to show you something because it's important to note here. Remember I told you the system date is generated by itself. Now, anybody wants to try this, they can go to the IAF.net site, and they can go to this registration form here. Try to change that system date, I dare you. You will not be able to. And you can see that when this was changed was April 2nd of 2001. So whoever changed this at that point in time changed it then, and there's no way you can change it. So to me, that's pretty significant evidence that that Jonathan had an email address at the University of Washington, and that somebody has covered it up. They didn't find it because this is a third-party site, Now, I'm sure that whoever did this, this what we call the dark side, went through the University of Washington with a fine-tooth comb. But they couldn't have anticipated all the other places these things could show up. And they are starting to show up. And thank you, Lexi, for helping these things could show up. And they are starting to show up. And thank you, Lexi, for helping us with that. I want to show you something, and this is something that we have never shown. Okay? This is the first time we have shown what I'm going to show you today in this picture today. Some people don't believe that, still don't believe, you know, even after they see that, yes. I can't hear what she's saying. At what point? Go back to the PC projector, please. Look, okay. Well, could you just let's save that till the end, and then we'll explain that. And I may address it, but I heard your question. Let me get to this first. Okay. This is a picture that we acquired recently from a former coworker of Dr. Reed's. And I wish I could show you the whole thing at once, but for some reason the resolution's not. I'm just going to have to pan around it. But if folks can see, this says December 1995 on this calendar. Okay. Here's a picture of his dog Susie. It's about 5 till 9 o'clock in the morning. This is Jonathan with his legs propped up on a desk. Now I want you to notice something here. First of all, let's go back to the calendar. You see it says December 1995. Okay. Now I want you to notice something here. You see that badge? Now it's going to be difficult for the people in the back to see, but this is a UW badge from 1995. It has Jonathan's picture on it, as you can see there, and it's a little blurry in this image here, but this actually says UW. Underneath that it says Medical Center. Underneath that it says Psychology, which is the department he worked in. Underneath that there's a serial number. Well, it's his faculty ID. It says 1995 next to that, and it says Dr. Jonathan Reed above the picture. Now, this was actually acquired by, like I said, a former co-worker of Dr. Reed's. This is the timestamp on that particular photograph. That's December 8th, 1995, and that's consistent with the calendar here. There are 7 days scratched off this calendar. The 8th day is not X'd out yet because the day's not over yet. It's still early in the morning. So I'm a little perplexed as to how, you know, this guy has a UW badge from 1995. He's got a calendar from 1995 on the wall. He's got a picture of his dog. It's clearly his office, unless somebody else just likes his dog so much they put his dog up on the wall. I don't know. Now, some other things you can see here is this picture actually says University of Washington Medical Center, and if you look at the picture, you can read this stuff a lot better. This is a scanned image. It's being projected from a computer to this. It's not going to be easy for anybody to see, even in the front row. But if you take a magnifying glass to the original picture, you can read that. So these things are all consistent with the fact that Jonathan worked at the University of Washington. Now, if that wasn't enough for some of you people, let me go back to that picture real quick here. I want to point something out that I forgot to point out. There's something on his finger right here that you won't be able to see in this picture. You can see it's there for people in the front, but I'm going to go to another picture of it so you can see it. But there's a ring on his finger there. Now, what is that ring? Well, let's just see what it is. Let's first go to this image. Can anybody see what that says there? Anybody want to tell? PhD. Thank you. Okay, let's see what this says. Can you read that? 1980. Okay. Let's take a look at this. This is the inscription. It says JBR Reed. Okay. And oops. I'm going to try to get you the rest here. This resolution change has screwed me up here a little bit, but that's all right. We'll get to it. Let's look at this picture. This says the University of California, Los Angeles, and you already see on the left side here it says PhD. On the right side it says 1980. On the rear inscription it says JBR Reed. And that's the ring that he was wearing in that picture. That's his class ring from UCLA, his PhD class ring. So, now, if that's not enough for y'all, remember Jonathan said that he went to San Diego State, and that's where he received his teaching certificate in 1996 or 1976 rather. And so we're going to show something here. This is another first photo that we're showing. Does that guy look familiar to anybody? Let's take a look and see what's at the bottom of this. Can everybody see May 76 there? This is a picture of, now, unless somebody thinks that Jonathan rolled back time, made himself 30 or 40 pounds lighter, much younger, and donned a graduation outfit, and then time-stamped a photograph from May of 1976, this is consistent, again, with what he has told us. So, you know, there are still people that, you know, they're just not getting it, you know. We're just going to have to keep slapping more of their faces with this stuff, I suppose. I don't know. These are, now, does anybody think that these are important? I mean, does this corroborate the case well? I mean, anybody think it doesn't help corroborate the case? Okay, that's a good point. Dr. Reed, when this all happened to him, shortly after it happened to him, all of his records were expunged. His electronic records from the University of Washington. As I explained, remember, I went to the University of Washington payroll department, and they said there was no Jonathan Reed that worked there. Well, all of his academic credentials, his work credentials, his bank records were all expunged, gone.
Who would want to discredit him?
Gosh, I don't know. You stumped me there. Okay. Let's go on now. I think I've given people some things to think about there. So let's move on to something that I think is incredibly important, and I want to make sure we get this in. Roll the second video, the videotape labeled number 2, and it should say blink. Now what this is, no, the second video, not the same tape, a different tape 2, second tape. That's okay, no problem. What we're going to see, we hooked up with Jaime Maussan. As some people might know, Jaime did a presentation partly on this case at the International MUFON Symposium in Anaheim, California. And this is one of the things that he produced as corroboration for this case. Okay. Is this the second tape? No. Take that tape out and put tape number 2 in. Okay. Make sure it's rewound, please. In any case, we gave Jaime Maussan, who, other than Art Bell, is the only one who has copies of this original video evidence. It should have a 2 in the little rectangle on the left. This doesn't look right. No, that's the analysis footage. That's like tape 3 or 4. Hang on, let me... Hold on, folks.
oh, come on, the dark side of shadow government. Well, if, oh, come on, the dark side of shadow government. Well, if you've been tuned into the news lately, I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So, once again, verification. But what's going on is now they're just going to make it okay. Now it's going to be all right for the shadow government to be there. And they're good guys, and they want to help you out. Okay? People don't want you to have this information. I'm going to tell you why. The basic answer for me is very simple. The UFO community is pretty much a very open-minded community that, just give me a minute, likes to question things and look at things completely. Truth seekers. Now, the government would love to hide a lot of things that are going on. So what they do is they make you guys look like the fringe. They're crazy. They wear Vulcan ears, nanu nanu, all that kind of stuff. Live long and prosper. And they've succeeded for the most part. But now more and more people are beginning to listen. I had a gentleman come up to me, he's here, and he said, God, you know, I never believed in this stuff. Never, you know, but I heard some of these other speakers and you guys on art, and you're talking about a shadow government. And I'm watching the news. And I'm sitting there, and I have my, you know, my Coca-Cola in my hand, and my wife's with me, and all of a sudden I'm saying, and in case of the collapse of the government, we have a new group that will take over, the shadow government. He goes, well, the Coke never made it to my mouth. Okay. I'm going to turn it back over to Dan. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead and roll that video. Sorry for the delay. We had a little faux-pas there, which always seems to happen. Okay, lower the lights too, please. Okay, this was produced by Jaime Maussan, as I said. Now, is there any doubt in anybody's mind that they're not looking at a creature that's blinking its eye there? Can you see the eyelids moving and closing and the pupil in the middle? And I mean, I don't know how anybody could look at that and see anything different. This is a little closer even still. You can see the slitted pupil. I mean, it's, you know, some people tried to say it was light reflections. Well, it can't be light reflections because the camera's not moving. I mean, it's basically stationary. I mean, but to me, it's clearly a blink. There's no way around it. Okay, keep that going for a second. This is the next sequence here is we actually turned that video upside down so people could see it, and then we did a motion stabilization to keep the head still so that the camera movement wasn't so jerky. A little bit easier to see that way. And again, you can see it open its eyes. And this was not enlarged or anything. This is the same size as it was originally. This is just repeated, the image stabilized version of this. And the whole scene's changing because we tried to keep the head stable, so that means everything else had to move. Okay, you can stop that video and bring the lights back up a little bit here. No, maybe not that much. Okay, let me go to, let's go to video 3 this time, and I hope this is really video 3, the one Mark III. And we're going to cue that up. This ties into some of the educational background. I was trying to explain that Dr. Reed's records were all expunged, and people were talking about why would somebody do that. Well, the credibility issue is really the reason, as everybody probably already knows. They were trying to keep him from being credible. A doctor of psychology from the University of Washington, it's a prestigious university, he would have a lot of credibility, you would think. And so in order to raise some doubt in the case, they felt it necessary to, well, there probably is a twofold reason. The second thing is they wanted to prevent him from having a livelihood. I mean, if he couldn't go to work, they got rid of his job. He didn't have any credentials because the university wouldn't verify that he worked there, and they got rid of his bank account. He had no money. So what's someone going to do at that point? Well, either I think a lot of people would have probably gone crazy from the whole thing. They probably either would have killed themselves or been committed. I don't know. Go ahead and play that tape number 3. Pardon? Trying to stay alive and stay out of trouble. these are some of the slides. Is that the one that's labeled Betty on as the first? I don't know how we got these numbers messed up here. But anyway, these are the slides. You can see some of the photographs. We'll go through these right now then, I guess, and then we'll put the interviews in. These are some of the slides that he took. Actually, they were a mixture of slides and photographs. I did a little blow up there, and you can see on that image that it's a pretty severe wound. That's the creature's head wound that I kind of blew up there a little bit. These are just an image, you know, showing his examination. And again, he, you know, in most of these cases, he was doing this on his own. That's the full body of the creature, so you can see that it wasn't just a head. Even though you could see in the video quite clearly that it wasn't just a head. These are some of the obelisk photographs. It was about 9 feet, 9.5 feet, and I verified that later on through a little analysis that I did. Yes, and you'll see in a lot of these photographs, and I'm going to show another one on a PC projector here in a minute, the foliage that gets in the way in these photographs is proof that this object was there. Like in this image right here, I mean, you can see that this is a three-dimensional object. And even if you didn't have the video, you should be able to tell that this is not just some cropped up photo draw or Photoshop picture. That's the link artifact that fell off the creature's arm when the dog attacked it, and he picked it up. It was laying beside the creature. Okay, go ahead and stop that and put the one in that says Betty. It should say Betty, Valerie, PCUPR. Okay. I just got them backwards. Yeah. What I was going to say before these slides came on was these are actually testimony from people that Jaime Maussan's group interviewed. Make sure we got audio. You need to rewind it if you don't.
Locally.
Yeah, rewind that back to the beginning. This particular person is a lady named Valerie. She was the loan officer for Jonathan at his bank that he banked at. And when Jaime Maussan got involved, Jonathan allowed him to interview a couple people. This is one of them, and we're going to see the next one in a second.
Probably 20 years I was a banker in various aspects of banking, locally and not locally.
You were able to meet Jonathan Reed, Dr. Jonathan Reed, long ago. Could you let us know how was your relationship with him?
Sure. Jonathan was about 15 years ago, about 1985, and I hadn't been at the bank very long, and that's where I met him.
He was a doctor. He was working in university, as far as we know.
Yes, he was. And over the years, I did a lot of transactions with him as I moved up in the bank. Loan payments and deposits, and he always had a good account. He had a lot of money. I wouldn't say rich on the comparison of a lot of clients, but he had an obvious doctor's income. But no, he had a substantial amount of money in the bank.
But it changed suddenly somewhere in time. Could you remember that? Could you let us know?
Oh, I can never forget it. As I said, I had worked my way up in the bank, and there came a day when we were called into a meeting, and we were told that we didn't know him. If anybody asked about him, we never knew this customer. And of course in banking there's a huge confidentiality anyway, and so we thought, you know, doctor, maybe it was a suit, of course we wouldn't talk about it. No, we didn't know him.
That's strong. That was the order.
There was no ifs, ands, or buts. And I went to check his his signature card. I knew all his paperwork, and I knew none of it was there. Nothing. It had been there the night before, because I had been looking at loan payments and when they come due, and I knew he had one coming due. And oftentimes we did a phone transaction to automatically transfer, and just prepared, and it was all gone, everything. And I basically got in trouble because they said he didn't exist, and I said he did exist, and you know what was going on, and this was against the law. And they said that if I wanted to work in any sort of banking, that if I wanted to work in any sort of banking, that he did not exist, and what didn't I understand?
Who are the people, in fact? Did you wait?
The bank president. I mean, all the senior, the branch manager, the president, directors, we're all in one room. Dr. Reed was a favorite among all the tellers. I mean, he came in and he would often bring his dog because we gave dog biscuits out to dogs in the pilot. So his dog Susie loved coming to the bank. He couldn't drive anywhere near the neighborhood even if he didn't want to make a transaction. We all loved Susie, and you know, we invited him for our holiday parties and our open houses. We often collected toys. You know, he could get us to do anything. Collect toys for the kids at the holidays, come serve at parties at the holidays, and suddenly, nothing. He didn't exist. We were to ask no questions. We were to never talk about it. And it would be instant, not only dismissal, but don't try to find a job at all. So after a while, and he had considerable fun in the bank. I mean, he had anywhere from $83,000 to $85,000 at any given time. Where did it go to?
They just disappear.
They're federal laws. I mean, money can't just disappear. Accounts, signature cards can't just disappear. You know.
No credit card, no check account, no nothing.
Nothing. No loan payments. He never had a loan on the books. And I went all the way back. I mean, I filed those papers. I knew all the readouts. Nothing at corporate. And that's when it kind of came to a head for me because I went to corporate and had somebody check what's known as fiche, where they do a micro picture of it. Nothing. He wasn't there. No Dr. Reed. So when I went back, I took on the bank. I mean, I let them know that I knew they were lying. And I'd be glad to come forward and say that. And I would go forward with a suit because what they were doing was illegal. They were angry with me, I was angry with them. But there wasn't a lot of power playing, and suddenly they were forthcoming with part of Jonathan's money, about half of it. I was still angry, and I said I wouldn't settle for that. But he wanted anything. He had nothing to live on. And so I got a check for him, and very soon thereafter, the bank and I parted ways. And it was very obvious to me that I had stepped on some toes, and I became very concerned for my own security, physical security.
Did they cause problems to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they called my home and told me to shut up. They told me I would never work again. I was terribly afraid. I mean, if they wiped out his existence at the bank, and they wiped out his existence at his work, you know, if he could disappear, I could disappear. So I left the bank.
Why you weren't able to give the number before?
I'm afraid. I know Gary's gone. I don't know where Gary is. People that Jonathan worked with that he spoke of, one day I pick up the paper, they're dead. So, yeah, I'm afraid. There's no hesitance in supporting Jonathan or believing Jonathan. That 110%.
Okay, keep going. We're going to roll to the second video. This is an interview with Betty, who's a former nurse of Dr. Reed. She worked with him for 5 years at the University of Washington.
My name is Betty.
In the same department.
I worked with Dr. Reed at one point in time back in 1996. I worked with him for about 5 years at the University of Washington Medical Center. He was very professional, very concerned about the children that we had worked with. Ran everything in the office by the book. I think in October of 1996, Jonathan came into the office, and you could clearly see that something had happened to Jonathan. And within about a week, Jonathan no longer existed. His office was cleaned out. The nurses on his staff were reassigned to other positions in the hospital, and were told, as far as we were concerned, that Dr. Jonathan Reed did not exist. He never worked at the University of Washington Medical Center, and it would be wise for us to adhere to that thought as well, otherwise we would no longer be working.
Who needs it?
The director of the child psychology unit that we were working with, and nothing was ever discussed. I mean, when his office was cleaned out, it was cleaned out. And there were no questions asked, no questions answered, and that's just the way it was. And it was like he was just completely and totally railroaded right out of the hospital. And the project that we were working on was closed down. The patients were sent to other doctors in the hospital.
Were you able to speak with the other colleagues there at the hospital to talk about Jonathan Reed's case?
We were all advised not to speak about Dr. Reed, not to speak about him, not to speak, to anybody within the hospital, outside the hospital, whatever. Management had decided that Dr. Reed did not exist, and they were very clear that as far as we were concerned and as far as our job security was concerned, we'd never heard of it.
In any moment you were doubtful about the Jonathan Smith?
If there's something to be doubted, then why did all this happen? I mean, why was he railroaded out of his career? Why was everything shut down? Why was everybody told, he doesn't exist? And, why were we told that, that we never knew of him? And to think that somebody could experience something like that and be completely and totally wiped away from, from his existence. And I just sat back in just total bewilderment as to how it could possibly happen. And happened to Jonathan, knowing who he was and his career, how professional he was at it, and how, serious he was about, what it was he was doing and the research he was doing, the children he was working with. And it's like, everything about Jonathan was completely and totally invalidated.
What do you think right now when these almost 6 years have happened, and now you are aware of everything, or almost everything, I think, about your friend? Is it necessary to help him? Is it necessary to speak about? Is it necessary to protect him? What do you think?
In one respect, I'm almost afraid, because I know that there have been people that have supported Jonathan and have been hurt in the past. And so, it kind of makes me afraid. I came with a certain amount of apprehension, if you will. But I also believe in Jonathan. And I know that what he experienced, he experienced.
Okay, you can stop that. How are we doing on time? Thank you. Now that's pretty compelling evidence, I think. These are people that we know. I was at these interviews. I know who these people were. Daniel Munoz, who's Jaime Maussan's right-hand man, was present for the interviews. Dan McAvoy was present for these interviews. We all know who these people are, and we block their faces because we want to protect their identities. We don't want their lives to be dragged into this mess that we've all dragged ourselves into. This didn't happen to them, and they haven't volunteered to make themselves public in this regard. I have, and I don't mind that. Dr. Reed was kind of dragged into it unwittingly, and Robert Wraith has volunteered, Dan McAvoy has volunteered. We don't mind showing our faces, but other people don't want to be part of this necessarily. They're willing to support him and testify for him, but privately. And that's why we hid their faces, so if anybody is asking. But there are people, including myself, who know these people are. And they are exactly who they represented themselves to be. Now, you'd have to ask yourself, are the people that are debunking this case, are they saying that he has now hired all these people to lie for him? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd have a real tough time convincing my friends to lie for me like this, especially on video, and tell them, yeah, I'm going to take it around the country and the world. I'm probably going to show it on a couple shows. You don't mind lying for me, do you? No problem. They'd sign right up for that. Don't you think all your friends would do that? I don't think so. Let's go back to the PC projector real quick. And I'm going to show a couple more things. I asked for time. How much time we got left? There was supposed to be on the monitor telling me. How much? Okay, good, good. I'm going to go over a couple more things, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan McAvoy, we've got a surprise for everybody. We've got a surprise for everybody at the end of this. Dr. Reed, in his efforts to want to understand this creature, after he learned that it was alive, and on the third day is when he found this, he opened his freezer up to re-examine it, and he got the surprise of his life because it sat up and screamed at him. And yeah, well, he did. And he was very, very frightened at first, and he left hurriedly, shut the freezer door, went in the house, called his best friend Gary, and said, "Gary, our problem is bigger than we thought." Okay. So Gary came over, and together they decided, okay, let's take a look at this thing. Gary was very cautious. He wanted to hit it and beat it and protect himself, but Jonathan convinced him, put down your weapons. Let's just see what happens. So he opens the freezer up, and it screams again. As it turns out, he later determined that it probably was the bright lights, the overhead lights, that was causing it to scream. It apparently was sensitive to the visible spectrum, like these kind of lights that. It's I think, a nocturnal creature, and it probably was extremely sensitive. And I think that's one reason why some of these creatures are seen with black eyes, because they have some kind of membrane over it to protect their eyes from bright lights. That's what I think. I don't know for sure, but I think some of you people who saw the alien autopsy video, they pulled these eye coverings, these membranes off their eyes, and they looked like sunglasses, only in the form of a contact lens. Well, then I must be right. You want to switch back over to the PC projector for me real quick? Thank you. Okay, another thing that I think is really important to verify that this creature is organic and alive, other than just the blink video itself. This picture was taken by Dr. Reed, and it just so happened that it produced the red eye effect in the photograph. And as most people know, anybody who's taken, just about anybody who's taken photographs, family photographs, whatever, when you have a flash that's close to the lens and you take a picture of somebody, it's a common problem. You get red eye effect. And I think, and it also happens, though, when you have a bright light source that happens to be at the right angle to be reflected off the retina and directly into the lens of the camera. And that's what happened in this case. And as far as I know, only organic creatures show the red eye effect. If this had been some kind of mannequin or rubber dummy or whatever, this effect could not have been produced. So, and just so you people can see that it does happen. I'm showing here that you can see it happens in animals too: cats, rabbits, dogs, as well as young kids and adults. I mean, it's a common occurrence with organic creatures, no matter what they are, animal or whatever. So I think that lends a lot of credibility, again, going back to that photograph, to the fact that this was an organic living creature. This was I think one of the earlier pictures taken, and again, Dr. Reed didn't know early on that this creature was alive. It unfortunately surprised him in that regard. In any case, after he got through with the initial shock of this creature being alive, he went back out to his garage and decided that maybe he could communicate to it in some way, shape, or form. So he opened the freezer up and he let it crawl out. And it did. It eventually, the wound on its head had started to heal already, and he had dressed the wound because I think he felt that it was, for me, I would probably have done the same thing. This wounded creature, and it's got this gaping wound with this tissue hanging off of it, and I would have just wanted to put it back in place because I'm a neat person. I would have done that. And that's what he did. And he cleaned up the wound and stuff because he didn't want to get blood all over everything. But in any case, the wound had started to heal, and it started to recover, apparently. It climbed out of the freezer, and over a few days, he was able to communicate to it. He attempted to, anyway. I'm not certain he ever understood exactly what was going on, but while he did that, he managed to record it. Now, he took some audio of it, and I'm not going to play it for you right now. I'm going to let him do that. he took some audio of that communication session that he had with it. It's maybe 10 minutes long or so. And he took audio initially because his camcorder was bigger and this he felt was less intrusive, and he actually did record it with video later on. However, that video unfortunately ended up disappearing, along with a lot of other evidence that he had. But he managed to keep this for whatever reason. When they took his evidence, they left the audio tapes behind. Now, maybe they didn't think there was anything of consequence on the audio tapes, I don't know. But he managed to keep it. And I'm going to have him play this later on. I think you're going to be really astounded by what you hear. It's pretty impressive. I've got some soil sample analysis stuff that I want to show you real quick, and then I'm going to turn this over to Dan McAvoy and let him do his stuff. Back to the PC projector real quickly, please. Yeah. This is a report, and I'm not going to explain to you what this report means. I'm just showing you that this physical report exists. We received this from Jaime Maussan. He took this to a gentleman named Dr. Zohar Gutierrez, who's at the Nuclear Medicine Hospital, and he's got all the details of who this person is, what his credentials are, where he's at. If anybody wants to know the details of that, they can contact me, and I will put them in touch with Jaime Maussan if you have a reason to know. This is a 2-page report, and it contains various printouts that, these are just printouts. They don't really explain what they are. However, we do have a video of Dr. Gutierrez describing what he feels. And that's the digital videotape, guys. I know that was the more complex of the ones, but if you could play that, I may have to. Let me go to page 2 real quick while they're queuing that up. Again, these are not really meaningful reports to your layman, but I just wanted to show you that they do exist, that we did run these tests, and then we'll let these guys hear what Dr. Zohar Gutierrez had to say. One other thing I want to mention is that the investigation process is not a point in time. It is a process. A lot of people think you can just dump this stuff out all at one time. Well, we don't have the resources or the manpower or the money to do that. It's just not possible. Thank you. Turn the lights down real quick, please. It says, after analyzing soil, bark, and plant samples taken, for those people who can't see, because this is in Spanish, from the surrounding area of the obelisk object, we found that there was, in fact, a definite increase in natural spectral radiation levels, great enough to leave detectable altered traces, but not enough to cause permanent biochemical damage. Except for sensitive plant fungi. Interestingly, we also found high concentrations of natural elements such as copper, zinc, and gold. These findings match and corroborate the conditions and statements made by Dr. Reed. My summary is that definitely, without any doubt, a very abnormal and unusual event with high energy took place in this area. Okay, you can stop that tape. Now, Jaime Maussan went further to explain to me, he'd spoken with Dr. Zohar Gutierrez himself, and he said that the interesting thing was that these occurrences only happened near the obelisk, and they took soil samples from several different places. They took soil samples from neutral spots far away from the encounter site. They took soil samples, plant samples, core samples from trees in the area of the obelisk in the immediate vicinity, and then they also took some samples from the creature area. And what they found was that these occurrences only happened in the obelisk area. And to them, that was definitive proof that these weren't just something that was present throughout the whole area there. It was only where the obelisk was, and they were high indications of high energy. Well, Jonathan doesn't know exactly what happened to the obelisk, but he went back the next day with his friend Gary, and they brought chains and a flatbed, and they were going to try to drag this thing out of the forest, but unfortunately it wasn't there. He brought the chains because when he tried to move it, it wouldn't move. I mean, when he was in the forest, he slapped it and he tried to move it, and it was basically pinned to its location, and it would not move. So at least by himself he couldn't move it, and so they thought, well, maybe if we can drag it onto the flatbed or something. I don't know how we're going to do this, but Gary was kind of persistent and he wanted to do it. But when they got back out there, it was gone. And in fact, the weird thing that he felt was that not only was it gone, but it was gone. And in fact, the weird thing that he felt was that not only was it gone, but it appeared that all the plants and things that he had cleared out to get good pictures of the obelisk seemed to be back where they were before. They seemed to be, you know, he had pulled some plants out to get clearer pictures of the obelisk, and nothing appeared to be disturbed. It appeared to be the way it was before he did anything, which, you know, he thought was really weird. And the other thing that he thought was weird when this all happened was that he had torn his shirt, and when he fell against the obelisk, something happened very strange, and he felt like he actually was absorbed just for a second into the obelisk. And then when he came back to his senses, you know, he felt a little dizzy, and he noticed that his shirt was no longer torn. And he just, you know, these are just weird occurrences that I can't really explain. I'm just trying to tell you what he told me. I think at this point I want to go ahead and turn this over to Dan McAvoy because we're running low on time, and I want to make sure that Jonathan gets this new audio in because it's really, really interesting. Dan, you want to come up here? Thank you. Let me introduce Dan real quickly, and then I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself. Dan is a retired military man. He's belonged to he's been an 18-year veteran of this field. He's been an active member in CUFOS, MUFON, many other UFO-related organizations. He's well respected by John Timmerman, Bud Hopkins, a whole bunch of people. Well, Dan took it upon himself to conduct an interview independently of all those organizations. He didn't want to be influenced by them, by asking for money or anything like that, and you know, he really wanted to remove himself from agendas. And so he did this on his own, and I'm going to let him tell you what he found out.
Hi. I wanted to reiterate what Dan said about Bob and Terry Brown and the UFO Congress having the courage to allow us to come back and at least present this information to you so you can decide for yourselves what you think happened. I also want to thank you all for coming out here and taking the time to listen. It seems we've come full circle in that I was here 2 years ago in March and met Dr. Reed and Robert and heard their original presentation. I had followed the case on the Art Bell show, but I wanted to see for myself what he had. As someone who has spent a lot of years in looking at this phenomenon and really being a lifelong pursuit, I'm most interested in contact cases, contact experiences. And this is one of the few cases where a contactee actually came back from the incident with a body of evidence. No pun intended, but a body of evidence. There was photographs. There were videos. There are pictures. There are audio tapes. So I felt like I had to get in, and Dan and I took it upon ourselves to make this an investigation, some of which we did jointly, some of which we did together. Thank you. Thank you. I came to Dr. Reed and I said, look, I'm willing to do a fair-minded, open investigation of your case. You've got to be fair with me. Give me your witnesses, complete access to your witnesses, access to your evidence, your videotapes, your audio tapes, whatever he had, but most importantly, to my access to himself. So I've spent the last 2 years observing Dr. Reed in many different settings and situations. This is a circumstantial case where a lot of, if you look at certain single pieces, they seem fine, but then you put it all together and you've got a great mosaic of a contact experience. There was also an extraterrestrial artifact that was brought back out from this encounter that Dan had shown the pictures of, the link bracelet. It's a silver bracelet. It's about this wide, wrapped sort of around your wrist. And this device has the ability to teleport an individual, perhaps to another dimension, another place, something that was manufactured somewhere, but not here on this planet. The device also allows for contact with extraterrestrial biological entities, described best as beings of light. I had the personal experience of witnessing this event. We have also had this artifact examined by reputable scientists, to include a member of the Ames Institute of NASA. This case presents us with a Herculean challenge. If we accept the reality of the encounter, then we have to examine our current paradigms and realize that these might be inadequate. We can also study the case for its importance to contact and realize as well that this case has been a lightning rod for reports by other contactees. Just in the past 2 years, I've gotten many, many reports, fresh reports of sightings and contact experiences. And a fair number also reports seeing a similar creature or a similar structured craft as to what he saw in the woods. In fact, just as an example, I had a gentleman who lives in Maryland. He's in his late 60s now. He related a story to me when he was a child, that he saw the exact same creature on his father's farm. And it stayed with him for 50 years. So I think that there's two things that are important. One is that we provide an open and hospitable atmosphere for those who've had experiences to come forward and tell them. Because the downside of that is, as they have tried to do with Jonathan in this case, is to try and keep you inside, and you don't want to come forward and tell what happened to you. Because look what happened to him. His life went to hell. So, you know, I think that's what's important. I hope that, if nothing else, you all come away with an open mind. I hope you come away with more sympathetic, but not in that term, more sympathetic towards contactees and their experiences. Because I think we've gone through the phase of sightings, and in the 50s and 60s, 70s, 80s, but now I believe we're in an area of contact. Not necessarily abduction research, because Dr. John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, they're doing yeoman's work there. Really, they have no equal. But I'm interested in the other cases of contact where an abduction doesn't occur. I've studied a database over 100,000 cases covering the time period from 1831 to the present. Of those, there are 2,300 that came strictly from the state of Washington. And I want to try and set a context, a frame of reference here, that this occurrence didn't just happen way out of the blue, but that it is just part of an ongoing thing that's happening up there in the Pacific Northwest. A full 25 to 30% of these cases are in close proximity to the encounter site, as Dr. Reed, that he had the encounter at. Also remember that this area is home to Yakima Island, Maury Island. It's the home of the 1947 sightings by Kenneth Arnold, which coined the term flying saucers. This geographic region has a rich cryptozoological history as well. And we're certainly receiving reports from those areas almost on a daily, if not weekly basis. I tried to take a review of the literature and see what else was out there in terms of contact. Because people have questioned me about, well, if I was Dr. Reed, I wouldn't have done this, or I would have done this, or I would have done it a different way. And I don't think anybody realizes how they're going to act until they're presented with a situation. But I did review some literature. And J.U. Perrin, P-R-E-I-R-A-I-N, in Phenomena Space U, did a review of 198 cases of EVE human contact. This research revealed that there were 27 cases of hostile contact. 44% of these involved alien aggression. 30% involved human aggression. 11% an actual fight. 15% accidental violence, all of which occurred here. In 1980, M. Moravec studied the physiological reactions to close encounter events from Australia. The results were as followed, all again which reported by Dr. Reed in his encounter. 70% reported fear, 15% curiosity, 9% amnesia, and 7% anger. There are hundreds of documented instances of UFOs that do something that provokes aggressive behavior. In his book CE5, Richard Haynes reports on 59 cases of overtly hostile human behavior. Amy Michelle said in 1958 that the visitors never display fear under any circumstances. And George Fawcett wrote in Clear Intent when confronting UFO occupants, and George Fawcett wrote in Clear Intent, when confronting UFO occupants, bone-rattling fear and blind panic become the order of the day. I say that just so that you can understand that some of Dr. Reed's actions may not, at the time of the encounter, seemed reasonable or rational, but something seems to take over when there's contact. I'd like to take a second and review some of the physical evidence that Dan had talked about. There was an analysis of the entity's blood and tissue. Blood and tissue samples were taken. They were taken to the University of Washington, given to a pathologist to study, and no one knew but us, and us meaning myself, Dan Iria, Jonathan, and Robert, who these two individuals were. But we knew early on who we were working with. I had an opportunity to speak with one of them during this initial process, where they were doing the initial analysis. It had some beginning reports, but it wasn't complete. And the way he explained it to me was that the blood and tissue analysis seemed to suggest that the creature was some sort of human, or some sort of human genomic and reptilian genomic. It had the same, it had 46 chromosomes, the majority being human, but then the others that we can most closely find as dolphins or sea turtles, something in the reptilian arena. His video and his films, the slides, the actual photographs, the negatives have been analyzed. They're determined that they are pictures of what they are, and that the film was made contemporaneously in 1996 when the event occurred. It wasn't current film. We've analyzed the obelisk, the structured craft for its size, its structure, and its angles, and a lot of this is on Dan's website. We examined the actual cameras he used out there in the field. Nothing unusual there. We noticed on several site visits that there were several anomalies: magnetic distortion, environmental changes, and there seemed to be now, after these many years, some sort of reconstruction of the site, shall we say. Now we're talking about an area in the woods that's part of the Cascade Mountain Range, way high up, and you saw on the video what the terrain, the foliage, etc. look like. Now, the floor where the encounter site occurred is covered by crushed rock. Crushed rock. If you go 50 yards to either side, no crushed rock. Right where the encounter occurred, floor of the forest is all crushed rock. And this is out of the way. I mean, you really have to drive a while through the mountains, and then you come upon it, and it's sort of there it is. Out in the middle of nowhere. There are no houses. There are no buildings. There are no people. But someone has erected fiber optic cables all along the perimeter of the encounter site. On the road going up and driving away, it says, "Do not dig. Fiber optic cables installed." Dan has already relayed to you about the eye and the facial movement that Jaime and his folks did so well, and Cole Lawson did so well for us. It's an early report of self-healing material, one thing Dan didn't get into, but the suit, the black suit that the creature was wearing, seemed to have the ability to repair itself. Dr. Reed took an X-Acto knife and cut it one time, it closed. He cut it again, it closed, and on the third time, the blade closed, the suit closed on the blade. It wouldn't let him pull it out. We've also seen, and I believe it's in the University of Illinois that just came out with a report perhaps 6 months ago on self-healing materials. We've done site visits and recreations using comparison photography. They've all checked out. Any good student of the phenomenon will recognize the distinctive aspects of this encounter that have been reported worldwide. Among these, electromagnetic distortion, time distortion, telepathic communication. There are also psychological and these are also psychological and physiologically consistent with the majority of close encounters. The first part of the investigation began with interviewing witnesses, and Jonathan, you saw a couple here, but I was able to talk with his only living closest relatives, his aunt and uncle, who live in the state of Washington. They confirmed to me that he did have a PhD, that he had the educational credentials he had, that they were aware of what's been going on with him. And his uncle, who was a Navy vet, said to me, I used to be proud of this country. What they've done to Dr. Reed makes me sick. Thank you. All right, I know we're running short on time, but I'll give you a couple little snippets other than that of the people I talked to. I spoke to a professor, and let me back up a second. These interviews were conducted in these people's homes. I wanted to see the settings in which they lived. And Jonathan's aunt and uncle, their home, had pictures years ago of him, of the dog, of his friend Gary, and virtually correlated everything that Dr. Reed had told me. I was also able to interview quite a few professors and students who were at the same university, San Diego State or the UCLA. I was also able to interview fellow co-workers, 3 hospital employees, the Photoshop employees, his family, his landlord. I've talked to a bunch of people. And these are all documented on audio, video, and/or contemporaneous notes. The professor, one of the professors, actually had, and he was a man of study, a learned man. His den was that of a former college professor, a man who had spent his years in that profession. He was able to show me a grade record book that said Jonathan Reed and a grade in an advanced class. And it was a book that was back in the 80s. I mean, there was no fresh ink. The book, it was made at the time. Also, the professor was aware because Dr. Reed had asked him to help him in his getting his money back from the bank and trying to recapture his credentials. So this lawyer was this professor was also interviewed by Jonathan's attorney, and the bank officer alluded to that, where he lost $85,000 and was only given half of it back. Again, most importantly, hundreds of hours examining and interviewing and observing Dr. Reed, using both direct and cross-examination techniques. I've subjected he and Robert Wraith to voice stress analysis to determine the veracity of their testimony. I had asked him to take me to the University of Washington. I wanted to see where his office was. Probably now it's been maybe 8-10 months. We got into the hospital one evening at the University of Washington. We made our way to the 7th floor, whereupon we were headed down the corridor to where he said his office was, and lo and behold, we're met with a security guard, University of Washington security guard, who said, "I'm sorry, Dr. Reed, you know you're not supposed to be here, and I'll have to escort you out of the facility." Thank you. It's the little things like that that make me a believer in this case. That's what I talk about, developing a mosaic. But I know we're short on time, and I want to share one more thing with you that was probably the most amazing experience that I've ever had. During this time frame, about maybe a year ago, a little bit more, Dr. Reed asked me to meet him somewhere far away from my home. I did that. I didn't know why. He wasn't forthcoming about why. Just asked me to meet him as part of the investigation. I did. We went to a hotel, Jonathan and I, where we went upstairs into this nicely appointed room, big conference table in it. We were joined by two other men, Caucasian, 50s, 60s, look like ex-military businessmen type. We all sat at the table, and I'll do this real quickly. We all sat at the table. One of the men pulled out from his jacket something that was wrapped in a blue cloth. Businessmen type. We all sat at the table, and I'll do this real quickly. We all sat at the table. One of the men pulled out from his jacket something that was wrapped in a blue cloth. He handed it to Dr. Reed. I was sitting here. Dr. Reed was sitting right next to me here. The folks were sitting across the table from us. They handed it to him, and they said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he said, "Yeah." And with that, he unwrapped the the package, and it was this Link Artifact bracelet. He said, "No matter what happens, nobody gets up to leave the room." Fine. With that, he took the bracelet, he put it on his wrist, and it still was silver of this color. Put it on its wrist, and it seemed to close around his wrist on its own. And as you saw some of the characters that are on this bracelet, they seem to be raised, almost as if one of them might be a control mechanism or an on and off button. We really don't know. He put the bracelet on his wrist, and he started to vibrate. And the bracelet became like frosty, like a frosty mug of beer. And he started to vibrate and shake violently. And then all of a sudden, he was gone. And we were sitting right next to each other. I go like this. He's not there. He's not in the room. And I said, "Geez, what is this?" Time, and it seems like in these instances, time seems to get a little distorted and not much time has passed, but it appeared to be seconds. And with that, off in the corner of the room was this sort of light, little orb of light, kind of glowing gold, 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 and it sort of floated across the room. And I look over, and there he is back in the chair again. Now, as we're sitting in this room, everyone's jaw is like, what? What happened? This orb of light floats through the room, and then all of a sudden begins to take on a shape, like a large figure in a robe of gold, like the only thing that I can describe it as a being of light. It stayed sort of hovering in the room, and then, boop, it was gone. And I look over at Dr. Reed, and he's exhausted and passed out on the table, and one guy across from us is crying, and the other guy is just rubbing his head. No, it wasn't videotaped. If I knew that this was what was going to happen, you could be sure I would have had the video camera with me. That's not to say that we won't get another opportunity to do this. Right now, the artifact is being cared for by a group of people that Dr. Reed calls the Alliance. A group of businessmen, industry people, scientists whose agenda is to bring forward the reality of extraterrestrial life, and they have an agenda, and they're working with him. They had another one of these artifacts, but theirs didn't work. This one does. Just a quick bit of science about it. A scientist affiliated with the NASA Institute at Ames examined it, determined that he can best describe it as emerging nanotechnology. That this was layered, that if you took a cross-section of the bracelet, you would have a layer of metal and a layer of what appeared to be these microtubules, some sort of nanotechnology, and then another layer of metal, and then another layer of the nanotechnology material. And he's produced a report that I have here on this and his conclusions. So I think that it's some type of biomorphic or bioelectric device that it has 3 pins underneath it, and it seemed when he put it on his wrist, he sort of grimaced like as if these needles poked his skin. And that seems to how it interfaced with his nervous system. After he came back and the bracelet was off, he had, like 3 little welts, on his wrist, where they were, and of course, a couple days later they had passed and disappeared. But I'm uncomfortable talking about that because I'm still trying to be very objective and open-minded, and I've never had an experience myself. So I really don't know how to wrap my mind around this yet. There's so much more. I just think we're running short on time, Dan. For the whole thing? Then I'll be around till Sunday. Feel free to come and talk to me. I'll answer any questions that you have. I'll show you some of the evidence that I've got, the reports, etc. And with that, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. You can keep that. I'm going to roll one more real quick video because I told people we would show this bullet wound video, and I want to do that. We've got enough time to do it, so let's go ahead and roll the video that I had queued up for you. There were some people that don't know this, but Dr. Reed was shot in Canada after he did his very first public presentation in San Diego. This is Dr. Reed. They're zooming up on his shoulder here where the entrance wound was. This was a 9mm caliber. Entrance wound was in the fleshy part of the trapezius. They believe ricocheted slightly off the collarbone and fragmented into 3 pieces. And he's going to turn around here, and you're going to see the really kind of graphic bullet exit wound.
And as most bullet wounds do, when they come in, they leave a hole like this. And when they come out the other side,
much bigger.
He still retains the scar of this still today. We have...
Now this was taken a couple weeks, maybe within a couple weeks of him actually being shot. Now he's going to throw a ruler down so you can see. It's about 2 inches in diameter, and this was actually, he was in a parking lot leaving a store, and some man approached him in a jogging outfit. He had a gun holstered inside of his jogging jacket, and he took the gun and pressed it into Jonathan's chest. And when Jonathan reacted spontaneously, he just grabbed it, and it went off. And the guy, I don't think he really intended to shoot Jonathan, but he reacted kind of coldly. He was a little startled, but then he just holstered the gun, and he walked away and got into a van and took off. Okay, you can stop that video.
We have not the bullet itself, but we have the casing.
That's right. The casing was laying next to him, and he picked it up.
The 9 would have ejected the casing out the side, and we retained it.
We've got a whole bunch of other stuff, but we don't have time for it. But I'm going to have Jonathan come up here, Dr. Reed himself, and play this video, this audio, and talk a little bit about it because it's a really fascinating piece of audio. Dr. Reed, please.
Thank you. Anybody want to give me a job? No, I'd just like to say, first and foremost, thank you to all of these courageous people who have saved my life and given me back some meaning and some integrity to which was taken away. And I'd also like to say and state there are many, many more of you who have helped me throughout all of this ordeal. Too many to name, and some who don't want to be named, as we've talked about. This is an ongoing problem that we have throughout the world. This phenomena exists. You know it does. And I definitely know it does. But there are those who want to keep this quiet, especially in this country. And since I've gone public with this, I've gone all around the world looking at people, talking to other people who have had interesting situations happen to them. And they all say one thing to me. They say, how come in the United States this is covered up? So I ask you that question, how come? Because when this first happened to me, I was not into science fiction. I didn't believe in any of this at all. But yet I couldn't deny what was happening to me. No matter how hard I tried to deny it, and I did, I could not deny it. And as I continued through this evolution of ideas, I began to see a new way of looking at things. I began to see that not always what we've been taught is the truth. Not always is the truth documentable. And not always can we rely on the people that we have learned to rely on to tell us the truth. One of the things I think we all need to realize, and this is something I've continued to say from the first time I was ever here and the first time I went public, is this is not about me, it's about all of us. We have the right to know what's going on in our world, not in this country or Mexico or Sweden, but in the world. This is our home. But we share this home with many, many other creatures. And I've learned that this creature that I found also shares this space with us from time to time. And I think we need to accept that, and we need to welcome it, even embrace it. I've had to learn to make this part of my life, and it's been very difficult. But I now accept it as another neighbor. And I think most of you who believe in this phenomena agree. It's just part of our life. I don't think the government needs to hide this from us any longer, because we know they're hiding it. We know the truth is coming out. It is being fractured slowly. The lie is being fractured, and the truth is coming out. The new information about Mars, about the water on Mars, about the artifacts that are on Mars, about the civilizations that basically used to live on Mars. Maybe our ancestors. I've seen these pictures. I've seen the real pictures. It's undeniable. But how come nobody else has seen it? Isn't this part of what we pay for? I think so. We need to work together. We need to quit fighting among ourselves. And we need to realize that there is a higher superiority out there that is more intelligent than we are. That is not a speculation. That is an absolute. We need to realize that on the food chain, we may be at the bottom. And maybe we need to be a little more generous with who our neighbors are and accept them, bring them into our lives, and start realizing that it is part of our world. All I can say, and I know we're short on time, is that everyone who has helped me has put themselves in great danger at times, at great risk for character assassination and physical harm. There have been many people hurt and killed to help me. This is not a fantasy. This is a reality. These facts exist. This is not something I made up. This is not something they made up. This is the truth. I challenge you to do one thing, if nothing else, to keep an open mind, hear what you heard today, which is only a fraction of what these guys have done. I mean, it would take 10, 12 hours to give you the full Monty here. But I challenge you to think about this, to think about other cases, to read the book, the little black book that I wrote. It's not a textbook. It's not Shakespeare. But what it is an account exactly as it happened to me. How I didn't know what to do. How I didn't know where to go with this information, and how many mistakes I made, and how my life fell apart because of those mistakes. What I can say to you is we need to be smarter. We need to accept people who have had these contacts, like I have, and embrace them, because they are damaged goods. Our society makes them feel like they are worthless most of the time. I have started a foundation in Mexico with the help of the Mexican government and some very, very special dedicated people to give people like me, people who have been contacted, a place of support. This place is called Mariposa Center, which means transformation, like the butterfly. This will give all of us a chance to have some dignity back in our lives, which we greatly deserve because we have been through a lot. But we also have a lot to share. And if you guys would give us the time, we'd be more than happy to share it with you, as long as you treat us with respect. And that's what I've always asked, and that's the only thing I have remained. We need to treat all of these people with respect. I thank you very much. God bless you. Oh, you want me to play this?
Okay. Hold on. Here we go.
One thing, as you know, I squirreled away a lot of evidence. And I have slowly brought out some more of it, as time passes. I did a lot of things wrong, and I did a lot of things right. This is one thing that you need to hear that no one has heard before.
Ever, yet.
Ever, in public. This is me in my garage with this creature, who I spent days and days with, who I videotaped, who I photographed, and I recorded it on every means I could. And I have some of that left, and Dan wants me to play that for you, so we'll try it.
I'm not going to hurt you, okay? Want some water? I can give you some water. Put some water in there. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'm going to put some water here.
Not static, that's the creature.
That's it. Sit down. Just sitting down. Set the water down. How are you? No, I'm here. It's okay. It's all right. Just relax. Just going to sit here. I'm not going to do anything. Just going to be here. I want to understand. Help me understand. Can you do that? Can you help me try to understand? I don't know what you want. What I can do for you.
And that's what he sounded like.
You can hear there's some dolphin innuendos in there. There are some bird-like sounds. And if you listen to the whole thing, the range that this thing is able to go through is incredible. From the lows to the highs, and you can feel the energy in these vocalizations.
I have hours of this, and I have a lot more that
What
we will...
happened to the... Yeah.
Freddie is back with his own, and I've seen him again several times.
If we're going to do questions, we have to go to the questions mic, number one, if we're going to do questions. Number two, we have a very big time problem because your party is scheduled to begin in 45 minutes. No, hold on. Hold on. If Dr. Reed wants to take questions, if he wants to do that, you guys can go to the questions mic. And I think we're out of videotape. I think that
Yes, time is up over here.
Questions can continue on audio for 10 minutes. Go to the questions mic. Respectful questions, not statements, not criticisms. Questions.
Thank you, Bob.
Go ahead. First man. Okay.
Oh.
This is the Link artifact. This is what so many people try to say doesn't exist, or simply is a figment of someone's imagination. It has symbols across the front of it. This is what I found in the forest in 1996 when I first encountered the creature, or the alien. I believe that it's some kind of bioelectric interface between the wearer of this device and the owners of it, that they actually activate it. It has 3 needles on the inside that actually penetrate your arm, the wearer of this, that I think creates a interface, biological interface, with the device and/or the beings who use it. So my impression of it is that it's designed to keep control and communication between the extraterrestrial and their superiors. I believe it fits on your arm, the wearer's arm, like this. If you push down, the needles penetrate your skin, tissue, and into the nerves of your arm. There is some pain to it, but it quickly goes away. It becomes kind of a cold, almost a frozen type feeling. Very quickly that pain subsides. But if it functions, which sometimes it doesn't, it starts throbbing inside your chest, literally a pulsation inside your chest that starts from the center and emanates to your extremities and becomes harder and harder. And then, when that happens, then it starts to be activated by there. I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. It's painful. As I hold my chest, it has a tendency to be less painful. And then they make the decision. Whether
Flash! Come!
Some people said the audio didn't distort. You could hear there the audio does indeed distort. Unless Dr. Reed just turned into a devil cloud or This is the black object we call the obelisk. Dr. Reed called the obelisk.
Come on, work. Come on, quit. I can't believe it.
He's saying that because he can actually see in the viewfinder that this distortion is occurring. He's concerned that nothing is being recorded. Far enough away that the electromagnetic disturbance doesn't bother them.
Where are you?
This is from about 100 feet away from me right now. He's standing on top of some trees that have fallen. And you can see that the foliage in the forest there, the branches and the plants actually getting away right here. I mean, this is a physical object. It's obviously there. Some people tried to say that it was cut and pasted in some kind of Photoshop application or something. I mean, I don't know how you can look at this video and say that that object is not there.
You see it?
Okay, continue that on. We're going to go ahead and show the house footage too. Might as well get that out of the way so that some of the people who haven't seen this footage can get a feel for how compelling and powerful this evidence really is. Turn the lights back down. You can turn the volume down just a little bit there. Okay, was there a question? It is in color. It's supposed to be. Wait, there you go. That's in color. I mean, I don't. Does that not look in color to you? Yes. Yes, I'm going to talk about that. Now this is after he's brought this thing home. He was, as you can see in the forest video footage, he was extremely distraught. He was you know, having a reality check because he didn't understand what was going on. He was extraordinarily sick. He'd been vomiting for over an hour. He was dehydrated, and that's why he was wheezing and panting. Plus, he was in a higher altitude, so the oxygen was thinner up where he was at. So he's running around the forest. He's dehydrated. He's sick. Well, he wrapped this thing up and decided he was going to try to hide it. Before he knew it, he was back to his car, and he ended up bringing it home with him. And this is a short time later, he decided that he was going to document it. Because he made some phone calls to some friends, and nobody had called him back. Curiosity got the best of him. He came home, got cleaned up, and then went and got this back out of the freezer that he had put it in his garage because he was afraid it would decompose. And now he's going to do a little physical examination on his own. He's either extremely brave or extremely stupid, I don't know which. At this point, he actually thought it was dead. So we'll learn later that it wasn't dead. This is the thermal blanket he wrapped it up in, and he had some straps he had wrapped around it that he'd taken off his backpack. Yes, see, he is blinking. Now, he didn't actually see it blinking when he was recording this. He was looking through his viewfinder in his camcorder, which was a black and white viewfinder. It was about 1 inch square, and that eyeball probably represented about 2 or 3 pixels in that display. So it would have been very difficult to see. Pardon? I can't. The creature was approximately 4 to 4.5 feet tall. He measured it. I don't know the exact number. I think he said 4 feet tall, 4.5. It weighed about 40 to 50 pounds. Extremely light. It was wearing a black one-piece suit that covered its hands and feet seamlessly. There appeared to be no seams or buttons or zippers or anything. It just appeared to be totally around it. You can see it's kind of a turtleneck, so to speak. It's kind of a long neck. Well, we didn't have him medically examined, but I would say he had to. He had quite a headache, and you'll see that later on. He actually, you know, well, some people don't know the story, so let me quickly recap after this video segment plays. How the creature actually got in this state is an interesting story all by itself. You watch the eye there as it kind of opens as he turns its head. He was a little out of it at that point, I would say.
AV dudes and dudettes, are we ready? Whoop. Checking one thing for... No, I heard the no. Okay. Well, a couple of things. Tonight is the party. Okay, I'll give you the cue. Tonight is the party. Again, please be sure you bring your ticket. You need your cocktail party ticket. We're going to have seating at 7:30. We're going to be closing maybe 10 minutes or so late, so they might need a few extra minutes, but, you know, we'll hope to be bringing you in about that time, okay? So be sure to bring your ticket. That is required. It's been an extraordinary day today. We've got so much stuff to talk about. We are floating. We are floating. And, wow. Well, this is going to be a capper tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm ready if the AV crew will tell me so. Okay. Here is the presentation that you have either been yearning for or dreading. Everybody has check their gloves and their brass knuckles at the door? No. All kidding aside, guys, the case that we're about to consider again is indeed, in all fairness and honesty, probably the most controversial case that has been out there that I can remember. The two sides that are polarized on the issue about this case, it's funny. I myself try to talk to people that are on the naysay side of it, and it's like a steel curtain is drawn. And it's almost impenetrable. But I, for one, hope we can penetrate it a little bit, because the Congress just simply wants to bring the testimony, the evidence, and the facts as we can have them disseminated to everybody so that you all can make up your own minds. Okay? This is what we're all about. Not to prejudge, not to condemn, not to censor. So, again, I only urge everyone, as I have from the very beginning on this case, to just keep an open mind. When we welcomed the group back 5.5 months ago, and they did a 3-hour update addressing most of the serious questions that had been asked about the case, many of them, it was rather astounding. It actually penetrated some of that steel shield for those that would at least listen and open their minds. And tonight, we're going to get yet more evidence and verification. So, Dan Irea is going to begin, and I'm not sure about the order from there, but then we have Dan McAvoy, we have Robert Wraith, and last we will hear from Dr. Jonathan Reed. And guys, even that, many people will say, shh, oh, doctor, no. Well, you've got to listen to the 3 hours of evidence that was presented 5.5 months ago, because, guys, this is Dr. Jonathan Reed. I'm sure of that now. But from this point forward, this is the Jonathan Reed, the Dr. Jonathan Reed Update 2.
Thanks, Bob. I think what I want to say first is I want to really thank Bob Brown and Terry Brown, because without this forum, I don't think there are some organizations that purport to be truth seekers. Well, the only ones I've seen so far that really come through on that has been the UFO Congress for me. Now, I'm not involved with MUFON. I really don't know or understand the organization that well, but I have been here, and I'm impressed with what Bob's done. He's allowed us to come and talk, and the most amazing thing is he's really doing this for you people, not for us. He's trying to give you an opportunity to judge for yourselves, and that's all we really want, is to have people like you come and listen and judge for yourselves without having to listen to all the hoopla that's going on around it. Just see it firsthand for yourselves. It's very simple. And it's the right thing to do for anyone who really wants the truth. Second thing is I want to find out how many people haven't seen or heard this case. Quite a few people. How many people came today just to see this, or came to the Congress just to see this case? Quite a few hands. Sort of. We got a lot of hands I see there. That's good. I'm glad to see that. I want to tell you a little bit about myself first, really quickly, and then we'll get on to the more interesting stuff, not my background. My background is actually mechanical engineering and systems. If we could switch over to the PC projector. Thank you. Here are some of my credentials, because that's what people are all about, it seems. I don't know why, but I'm going to show you anyway, just so people know. I have a Purdue degree, Bachelor of Science. There that is. I worked for many different companies throughout my career. Microsoft was the one I was working at actually when I heard about this case from Robert Wraith on the Art Bell program. I worked at Compaq Computer, Apple Computer, Lucent Technologies, AT&T, doing mechanical design for consumer electronics products. Okay, that's enough about me. Okay. Now, one of the things that most people will want to see who's never seen this case before is the video evidence. And I want to go ahead, for posterity's sake, I think we've got to show it. And so cue up the first video, and we'll let that play so that everyone can get a feel for where this case came from. The first video, yes. Do we have audio? It's not really critical.
Focus.
Can we get the lights down a little bit up front?
Losing.
This is an electromagnetic disturbance. We believe it was caused by the obelisk, which is the black thing you'll see here shortly.
Oh, come on, work.
Now the noises that you're hearing here, those are coming from the creature. Now he thought that as he was moving its neck that air was just escaping from the lungs, and he just wrote it off as, you know, just this creature was still dead. Now he's kind of opening the eye there just to examine it. He's filming with one hand and moving it around with his other, so it's kind of hard. You can see him kind of feeling out there because his distance perspective is a little off looking through the camcorder. His what? Yeah, there is some blood up by the head. Oh, it was red. And I assume that it was probably red because it breathes air. It's oxygen-based, and therefore it probably used hemoglobin the same way that we do, and so its blood is going to be red also. Can somebody repeat that question for me up front? No, this is the same footage that we showed. I'm just showing this so that other people who haven't seen it can see it. Some people may not have a good recollection of all the footage. Now, this is the same footage. Okay, you win. I can argue. This was filmed in October of 1996. Now, he actually had the encounter on October 15th. This is sometime that evening, late that night. Okay. Yes. This is not the original. This is a copy of the original. The actual original, I believe, was stolen. This copy happened to have been sent off to a relative or a friend, I'm not sure which, and that's how he ended up still having it, because everything was taken out of his house. That noise came from the creature again. Yes, he actually has this camcorder. At some points, he has it duct taped to a ladder, At other points, he has it sitting on top of a box. Of course, you can't see that because it's sitting on top of it or duct taped to it. That's the wound. Of course, you can't see that because it's sitting on top of it or duct taped to it. That's the wound, and you can see that's a pretty severe wound. It actually breached the skull when he hit this creature with a tree branch. It was attacking his dog. It killed his dog. He reacted instinctively by, he had a tree branch already in his hand, and he swung it and hit the creature, knocking it down. The remains of his dog was white powder, and I'm going to show you that later on. There were no remains that you could just pick up. I mean, it was powder. And I'm not sure he had any interest in really in getting that. That came from the creature too. Okay, I think you can stop the video at that point. You can see the whole body is there and everything. So, you know, some people say it was just a head at one point. Okay, now, real briefly, I want to summarize what happened to get to that point because I didn't realize that no one.